The months and years ahead for Linux look really friggin' bleak. Less software compatibility, less total features, less accessibility, less tested software, slower software. The number of ways you can quantify the goodness and the quality of a desktop operating system and platform, all of them, it's just going into the toilet. And what's really horrific about it is it's by design. It is a goal by big tech, by the Linux and open source foundations, by the major Linux projects. They're all going into this eyes open and they're saying, yes, we are going to do this. They're driving Linux headfirst into a really gigantic ditch. And it's just really, really crummy. I wanted to walk through with you just some of the ways these changes are planned in the months and year and a half or so ahead, because holy heavens, it is absolutely insane. To start with, and those of you who have been watching the coverage and listening to the coverage from the Lunduke Journal over the last few years, you know most of this. But most major Linux distributions have somewhere in their roadmap the plan to swap out the core utilities with untested clones of the core utilities. And what that means is things like sudo, ls, for getting the list of the files in your directories, the kill command. I mean, just all of the standard things that you type when you open up your shell, your Linux terminal, your command prompt, whatever you want to call it, are getting swapped out. Ubuntu announced that they're swapping out sudo, along with potentially a few others, in the very next release coming up in October. And they're swapping it out with versions rewritten from scratch in Rust. And that's fine. I will put the debate about blah, blah, blah. Rust is great. Rust is going to save us all from memories or whatever. We'll put that all off to the side for a minute. The reality is, if you look at the replacement solutions for sudo, ls, and everything else, they are distinctly less tested than the software they're replacing, and they don't have all the features of the software that they're replacing, right? So there's not really a benefit. Are they significantly faster? Are they going to make your machine run faster because you have a new version of LS? No. Do you get new features? No, you get less. Is it more stable? Well, we don't actually know. It might be. The new sudo rewritten in Rust could turn out to be the most stable piece of software on earth. We just don't know. It's untested. So we're taking Linux, a desktop Linux systems, and I'm talking the whole kit and caboodle, the GNU core utilities and X Windows and everything else that has been just battle tested for decades now. And we're just saying, nah, and chucking it out with the bathwater. It's ridiculous. And which brings us to X11. And many of you have been following along with the Xorg, Xlibre, X11 Wayland craziness that's been happening over the last couple of weeks. But the reality is, and that it all seems to be timed to be happening at the exact same moment, both GNOME and KDE have on their roadmap getting rid of X11 dependency, right? And Ubuntu getting rid of Xorg and X11, right? So they're just taking this core piece of what makes a desktop Linux system what it is, and they're getting rid of it. Now we could argue until we're blue in the face about the good reasons why maybe you'd want to replace Xorg or X11 with something else, why you think Wayland is a better solution. And that's fine. That truly is fine. The problem we face is when we switch away from the tested, supported solution of Xorg and X11 over to Wayland, we do lose some things in the process. And it's worth noting what those things are. We have significantly worse accessibility features. And that's not just like me freaking out and hyperventilating about something I made up. That's that's something that people who have, say, visual impairments and run visual impaired Linux distributions and software projects have been talking about for some years now, is they can't move from Xorg and X11 over to Wayland because the Wayland protocol itself and the Wayland implementations that exist don't provide them with the vision accessibility features they need. So they simply cannot move over. So that means that we are, by forcing people to distributions and people to move over to Wayland from X11, we're saying we want to leave visually impaired people behind. Like on purpose, right? That's just the way it is. But we're also having significant software compatibility issues. And we are talking about the ability to run some pieces of software. We will lose that along the way, but we are also just losing some feature compatibility issues, right? So like the developer of KiCad, a computer-aided drafting piece of software. It's very popular on the Linux desktop side of things, wrote a series of articles listing out all of the just technical issues and usability issues with KiCad as a piece of software running under Wayland. And the consensus is that yes, you can run KiCad under Wayland using the X Wayland session, meaning a tool on top of Wayland that provides support for X11 and X11 based software. But the end user experience is significantly worse, and the developers have no reasonable way to fix it. So we're losing functionality, we're losing accessibility, we're losing the ability to run some pieces of software, and to put a little cherry on top of all of that, we're actually losing, for at least some pieces of software, speed. Now, I want to preface this by saying all available benchmarks, the speed loss is only a little. I mean, we're talking a little. We're like one of the benchmarks I saw of one big commercial game. Like if you were getting like 60 frames per second under Xorg and X11, you're getting like 58 frames per second under Wayland. So it's not like it's going to dramatically change life how much performance we lost moving over to Wayland. And in fact, there were a couple of benchmarks where Wayland got a tiny bit faster. Overall, it's a tiny bit slower, but there are some where it's a tiny bit faster too. But in the end, it's kind of a net degradation, just a little bit. And so why if we're losing functionality, if we're losing features, we're losing compatibility, why also have a little bit of a performance hit? That's just so stupid to me. Which brings me, since we're talking about games, to the 32-bit support issue. Okay, I think this is just asinine and stupid. So several Linux distributions have been, currently are, or have in their roadmap for the near future, the complete removal of 32-bit support. There's several of the big ones. Fedora is famously talking about it a lot right now, but other distributions as well. And what they mean by that is not the ability to pop in a CD or a USB and boot a live ISO of a 32-bit version of their distribution, though that going away too. What they really mean by that is the loss of 32-bit support libraries. And this is a real big key thing here, because what that means is that by default, these systems will no longer ship with the ability to run 32-bit software on a 64-bit system, right? Because almost everyone out there now is realistically, if you bought a fairly recent computer, it's a 64-bit computer, right? 32-bit is more for legacy machines for the most part, especially for laptops and desktops. But there's a huge amount of 32-bit software that we're still running. Sometimes you don't even realize it. Sometimes it's invisible. And if you run a lot of games, like you run Steam and whatnot, you are running a metric ton of 32-bit software. So getting rid of the 32-bit support libraries means tossing out a mountain of of currently supported AAA and commercial video games. Other software too, but I think the games is where people are really going to notice it, because there's just so many 32-bit binaries out there for commercial video games that you will no longer be able to run. And at least not without jumping through crazy numbers of hoops. And so what we are ending up with here is, if all of these come to pass, and they all are in various stages of happening right now, like the releases that are coming out right now, the next release of Ubuntu, the next update for GNOME, et cetera, they're all of these are coming to pass, right? These aren't just purely theoretical things. The people in power desperately want these changes, which means Linux, by definition, by the end of the year, will have at least for most of you, for most desktop Linux users running the biggest distributions, you will have access to less software. The software you are running will have less features. You will have less accessibility software. The software you are relying on, including the most core utilities in your system, will have not just less features, but be less tested, and will have an unknown level of security, stability, and functionality. And on average, your system will be a tiny bit slower. Not much, but a little bit, which is just like slapping someone after they got beat up. It's like someone got beat up after going 10 rounds with Mike Tyson, and then you walk up to them and give them a little slap in the face. Right? That's what the slowness change is like. It's crazy. It is absolutely insane, and it seems like all of the major projects are pushing it that way. The major foundations, the big companies, they are desperate to make it happen. And every attempt that I've seen in order to stop this from happening or lessen the impact has been met with fierce, almost violent, rage-filled opposition from these projects, foundations, and corporations. One example, and this is the big example happening right now, and I think it's a fun one to point to, is the Ex Libre project, right? Because the Xorg people, Xorg has been the de facto X11 open source implementation that all Linux distributions have been shipping for years now. They've declared that it is dead, right? The Xorg people, the free desktop people, the Red Hat people, they've declared that Xorg is dead. They do not want new releases with new features. And it's not because, and I want to make this very clear, Xorg is not resistant to releasing new features because they're afraid of breaking things. They break things all the time. They just broke a ton of compatibility with NVIDIA drivers by doing a very, very tiny release. And as I was looking through their commits, it looks like they did it on friggin' purpose. It's ridiculous. I mean, it literally is. The changes they implemented were insane. Now, and Ex Libre decided, well, let's fork Xorg. Since Xorg wants to kill itself, and we all rely on it, let's fork it and keep it going. Let's keep developing and maintaining the darn thing. The response to that has been pure seething hatred. The Fedora project has been discussing a proposal by one developer that, you know what, let's move from Xorg since it's abandoned, or they're trying to kill themselves. They're like trying to drop themselves on their own sword, and let's move over to Ex Libre, which at least is supported. We don't know what its future looks like, but at least someone's trying. So let's move from Xorg to Ex Libre. The response has been crazy. It has been people screaming about, well, Lunduke, because anything that Lunduke likes, these people have to be opposed to. Things like stability, tested software, features, accessibility, but they hate these things, right? They hate these things because Lunduke likes these things. So, like, the Fedora people are screaming about, quote, bigots like Lunduke and other bigots. Bigots like Lunduke and other bigots. That's literally a phrase from the Fedora mailing or the Fedora forums. And how if Fedora used the fork of Xorg, it would be, and this is a direct quote, a stab in the back to all LGBTQ plus BIPOC and marginalized contributors that make Fedora and everything else it relies on. They seem to feel like if Lunduke likes something, you can't use it. Otherwise, you're basically murdering and committing genocide of LGBTQ and BIPOC people. It's really stupid. It's really stupid. And so they're fighting about and arguing about DEI and all these other things as a reason why they don't want to use supported software. Right? And this is an ongoing thing where these organizations are fighting tooth and nail to avoid using supported software in their distribution. They're desperate to get rid of, say, accessibility. It's insane. It's really, really insane. And this seems to be coming from Red Hat. It seems to be coming from Fedora, which is owned by Red Hat and owned by IBM. Let's make that very, very clear. But we're also seeing it from huge portions of kind of the extremist activist wings of all of open source. And it within GNOME, within KDE, it's all over the place. In fact, the more you talk about this, the more they attack you. The more you bring up, I would like my Linux desktop system to have, I don't know, the same features it has now, not less, with the next release. I would like it to not get slower. I would like it to be well tested. I would like to have the same accessibility features for blind people that we got now. The more you talk about these things, the more they attack you. So as I've been ratcheting up my discussion of why on earth are we doing this? GNOME, the GNOME project, the largest open source desktop environment that's out there in terms of just user base. I mean, it's shipped by every enterprise distro. Let's make that clear. Red Hat ships GNOME, right? They've started attacking me in crazy ways. They started calling me an apartheid, ethno-supremacist, baby killer, apologist clown, a fascist maggot, etc., etc., etc. And the person who forked Xorg is an actual Nazi, according to them, quote unquote. And they made it very clear that quote, there is no place for fascists, meaning me, within the open source and free software community or societies at large. And the same people who write this will then go on Mastodon, the Fediverse, the crazy distributed social media network, and make follow-up statements along the lines of the only good fascist is a dead fascist, and things along those lines, making it very clear that their intention is that not only should Lunduke and anyone else who wants desktop Linux to be as good or better going forward than it currently is now, that not only should they not be allowed or to be part of the projects, etc., but they should be murdered. It's crazy. It's crazy what's happening. They're losing their damned minds. And they're all doing it on marching orders from Red Hat and IBM and their various corporate overlords. I mean, shoot, the Linux Foundation itself is run by companies like this, including Microsoft. I want to mention this really quickly. Over the last how many years? Since 2009, I believe. Since 2009, I've been doing a series of shows called Linux Sucks. And I've done these almost every year. I've missed 1 or 2 years here and there. But almost every year since 2009, I've done a Linux Sucks show. And the idea behind Linux Sucks was a fairly simple one. It was an opportunity to express in a cathartic fashion all the things that annoy me about running Linux on a desktop computer. Not servers, not embedded systems or phones, but desktops and laptops. And it all started with me going to conferences, getting together in a room, standing in front of a room full of Linux nerds, and us just listing off all of the ways our Linux system was driving us nuts. Oh my gosh, I couldn't get Wi-Fi working. Why can't I get sound working? How come there's no video games? On and on and on and on, right? But it was always done from a place of love, right? We were recognizing that Linux was a quality system, that it was improving regularly, that the reasons for optimism were there, that the future looked brighter than it currently was for Linux in general. And so we felt comfortable sitting down and cathartically complaining for a while. And it was great. It was great fun. I'm not going to do a Linux Sucks this year. 2025 is not going to have a Linux Sucks show. And the reason for that, I think, is really simple. Right now, Linux is being destroyed utterly from within. It's being made slower. It's being made buggier. It's being made so it has less features and less accessibility, less available software, runs on less hardware, and on and on and on and on. People are being kicked out of Linux because they have the wrong views or are the wrong religion. I mean, shoot, the GNOME project just did an entire blog post that was not disagreed with by any member of the GNOME board about how Lunduke is bad because he's Jewish. It's crazy. Me giving you a list of all the things wrong with Linux as a Linux Sucks show feels like it's kicking a crippled puppy. It's like you see a dog, a 5-week-old puppy lying on the side of the road, mangled and beaten, but barely alive, and you walk up to it and just decide to kick it a couple of times. I can't do that to Linux, man. I love Linux. I don't want to do that. I use Linux as my primary machine and have for years now. I'm not going to do that. I'm rooting for Linux. And so normally I feel confident getting up and shouting from the rooftops, Linux sucks. But, from a place of love. When I used to be, in a past life, an engineering manager, right? I had crazy fancy titles like Vice President of Technology and blah, 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 blah. And one of my favorite things to ask potential developers who are applying for roles, especially more senior development roles within the companies I worked for, was I like to ask them what their favorite programming language was, right? Okay, what's your favorite programming language? Not the programming language you use the most, but what's the one you love? Okay, so they tell me that. And so I tell them, so once they tell me what the language is, Python or C or whatever, I say, great. Now, what is it why do you hate that programming language? Excuse me. What is it about that programming language that's your favorite that drives you up the wall? What would make it so that you say this programming language sucks more than any other programming language? Because the reality is, any good nerd, the things that you love, you have a laundry list of all the reasons it sucks. You know what I mean? If you say I love C and you ask someone, okay, great, you love C. Why do you hate C so much? They'll be able to turn right around and give you a list. Bang, 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 bang. Here's all the things I hate about the thing I love. That's just how it is. And Linux Sucks was kind of that same way. This is something we love, and now here's the laundry list of all the things we hate about it. And it's some tough love, it's some constructive criticism, it's cathartic venting, call it what you will. But this year feels different to me. This year feels fundamentally different. It feels like every week we have multiple mini Linux Sucks shows. Because every single week, a big tech company or a major foundation or a major project is doing something that materially, measurably, demonstrably makes Linux significantly worse. Worse to use, worse to develop for, worse to talk about, worse to everything. And it just doesn't seem like having one single Linux sucks. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't kick that puppy. I can't kick that crippled puppy. I can't go up to the kid in the wheelchair from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, dump him out of the wheelchair, and then, pee on him. I just can't do that. I can't do that. Linux is not in a place where it can handle a Linux sucks this year. If I Linux sucks Linux would die. I can't do it. I can't do it. Plus, I just would feel bad. But this is where we're at. this is realistically where we are at with Linux in 2025, and it's frustrating. It truly is. And what's crazy is it's by design. And I'm going to keep covering it as the year goes on. And undoubtedly, probably by tomorrow or the next day, there will be yet another report from the Lunduke Journal about how some foundation, some distribution, some desktop environment or big tech company is doing yet another thing trying to destroy Linux. Not hyperbolically destroy it, but, oh, here's how they're making it a little bit slower. Oh, here's how we're dropping support for this. Oh, here's how we now have less software compatibility. Oh, here's how they're kicking out 30% of all developers because they have the wrong religion, politics, whatever, country of origin. It's crazy. There are little reasons to hope here and there. There's little bits of good things happening, and I'm trying to make sure that we cover those as they occur, like forks of Xorg and other things. Attempts by people to keep what makes Linux great and open source great continue to keep going. And I'll try to continue to keep covering that as I cover the the horribleness. I want to say thank you to all of the Lunduke Journal subscribers for making it possible to do this sort of coverage, even in the face of every major big tech company, every major tech foundation just having it out for me. Man, when tech foundations like GNOME and whatnot are coming out and just straight up calling you a baby killer, holy heavens, there is no chance on God's green earth that the Lunduke Journal could support itself off of advertising revenue from tech companies at this point. There's no possibility. Like, I don't take advertising revenue from the big tech companies specifically because I don't want them to be able to influence me. But at this point, the hatred, the raw, unbridled rage they feel towards the Lunduke Journal, to the point where they can't even control themselves. They go on literal Jew-hating rampage tirades on their own public foundations' websites when they just hear my name. Oh, I don't think they're going to give me any money. What do you guys think? Luckily, I've got all of you. So go to lunduke.com, support the Lunduke Journal if you can, if you feel like it. It truly is appreciated. It helps keep the Lunduke Journal big tech free, ad free, and all the other good stuff. Plus, there's other ways you can watch and listen and link and read and all that sort of thing, all at lunduke.com. Truly appreciated. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.